Welcome to an AVID chat. I'm David Hartpool and Jack Arnold. Jack, great to see you as always.
Good to see you.
If you're joining us today, we're going to talk about something that I think we all face in our lives, and not just financially, but you can apply it definitely in financial situations, and that's really the art of goal setting. We believe as financial planners that there are specific things that will help you be a better goal setter, and that's really the purpose of today's chat. So,
Yep.
I'm not really sure where to start other than I do think one thing that is apparent in all the years that we've been doing the financial planning side of things with setting goals is there's a lack of execution. And I believe that that primarily starts with not taking the time ahead of actually taking action to say, what are my specific steps in order to get to this end result?
Right. I think so. I think there's also a there's always like a emotional aspect to it, but there's also when you're setting a goal, like you have to be pretty specific as to what you're trying to accomplish, but it also has to be somewhat, reasonable in terms of a time frame. It'd be tough to say my goal is to be a better person.
Right.
Like what are you supposed to do with that? It's what does that mean? I think you'd have to break that further down. Like we would say that's a high level objective type of thing. That's something that's a lifelong aspiration, is to be constantly improving. You kind of never really accomplish that, but there's certain kind of intermediate steps along the way, which are more like intermediate goals, to say, all right, well, first step would be to X. I want to, this is a way that I can actually improve myself or improve my financial situation. And that's this particular short term goal. Maybe it's 3 months or 6 months, but I can't make it 5 years. It's just too far. So I think, like you said, it's
Mm-hmm.
just first being good at setting a goal and being reasonable about what that is, and probably making it something where it's like, it's a few months out. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's 3 months, but you start getting beyond 6 months, a year, it gets to be a little bit more difficult to stick with that.
Yeah. I wonder how much of what we see is indicative of what we are kind of taught and what we hear, and we're kind of like bombarded with this safer retirement and max your 401k and you do
Yes.
Roth conversions and all these things, and so we've almost been trained to think 30 years out, and we come across as a lot of people are relatively on track or setting up themselves using retirement plans, for an example. But then when you pare it back down to, like you just said, some intermediate short term goals, short term financial accounting, cash flow, safety nets, all these things that we would say is the foundation to financial planning, it's like a hot mess in there. And I don't think
Yeah.
that's because of someone's inability or their knowledge. I think a little bit of it is we just are not programmed, nor have we ever been trained to look at your financials like you do a goal and say, let's start with this very first step. It's most boring, but it's what's coming in and what's going out. And now what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, even just talking through this is making me think, like, I do think there's a lot of, there's almost, there's the way out that people are good thinking about is way in the future. Kind of it's maybe a cloudy picture, but they're
It's
good
like a
thinking of
dream,
way.
a
Yeah.
dream type of
Yes. Exactly.
scenario.
Things are in the future, it'll be like this. And then people are good at, like, obviously getting through the day. Like, I have to get to work or I have to do this, and I'm good at somewhat getting through the task of the day. Those are, I need to get through today, but there's no real intermediate between those
Mm-hmm.
two. There's, all right, but what are your habits and what are you setting yourself up for, even just 3 months from now or 6 months from now, in terms of what you're doing, and then constantly coming back and redoing those types of intermediate goals, and then resetting and saying, all right, in 3 months I want to do this. Boom, 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 boom. Here's the steps I have to
Yes.
take. You get to that intermediate goal, and then you say, all right, let me reset. That worked, or that didn't work, or in getting to this point I realized there's another way that I want to go, so let me do my next intermediate goal, and that's 3 months out or 6 months out, and what are the steps, and just constantly repeating that. And then you have a little bit more control as to where you're headed, 5 years from now. But you can't make a goal 5 years from now. It's kind of a series of shorter term, intermediate, every 3 month type of goals. So I think that's it's definitely helpful to do that.
The, I agree 100%. What popped in my head as you were saying that halfway through is, man, that just sounds like a lot of work, though. Like, it's
Yeah.
just, that's a lot of effort and energy and focus. And you mean I got to revisit this thing and make adjustments? And I think a lot of us, I would say, I could tell you plenty of examples. Well, I would just say, yeah, I'm good. And you go back to autopilot just because it's easier because life's busy. And I've got, an 8 and 6 year old chaotically running around in school and sports. And so I think it's very difficult to actually take that mindset, break it down, and then be committed to doing that. And one thing that I know we preach at Avid, we help our clients do this, and that is, what is the purpose? What's your true value out of doing whatever it is you're trying to change or improve or get better at? Because that's what's going to keep you focused on resetting and tweaking and changing so that you ultimately accomplish the things that you set out to do in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so much, if you say, oh, my investments, whatever, my long-term savings, these are long-term things and I'm probably not going to touch for 20 years. Yeah. There's just so much attention paid on, over what's happened over the last few months with my investments. It's like such a long-term thing. That's what we pay attention to instead of what are some real things that could make a huge difference in the next 3 months, or if I focused and did this kind of goal setting exercise every 3 or 6 months, how far could I get with this in a couple of years if I was to constantly do this work? It's the whole, uncommon results, uncommon effort type of thing. Like, yeah, I mean, it is
Yes.
difficult and it's not common. It would be pretty rare for somebody to be like, all right, I'm going to actually sit down and go through and say, here's some things I want to accomplish in the next 3 months. Let me break this down into daily actions if I can do that, and then work towards doing that. And then in a few months, come back, look at it again. It's more what I've seen, anyways, is seat of your pants type of day to day, and let's get through the day. And then I'll end up in a place, in the future. I'll ping pong around and I'll eventually end up somewhere and it should be okay. But I'm not necessarily taking control over where I'm going.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of a chaotic approach that we've all done, we see it all the time, like you've said, that ends up creating more anxiety as you get older? And let's say that this, idea of retirement for people is kind of the initial focus to saving and watching their money, and then they get closer and closer, and maybe a little bit of panic sets in because they're not sure if they actually have been doing the things in the right way, and then you kind of start to rely on shorter term news, the market and what's going on, and I need
Yeah.
I need this money maybe to grow faster because I really am not as prepared as I thought or would have liked.
Yes. I think that's a huge part. I mean, I need, people chasing, lottery type of outcomes where I don't have a lot to put into this investment. I can put a very small amount into it. It has to go crazy because I have a lot of making up to do because I didn't really plan for this going into it. And I'm probably way behind where I want to be. So I need to find something that's going to the moon type of situation. And, that just doesn't really work out. I guess the unfortunate part is there are always going to be stories. Somebody wins the lottery. That's not, somebody will win it.
Right.
That's just what happens. Will that be you? Probably not. I don't think that that's earth shattering to say you're probably not the 1 in 100 million that's going to win the lottery, and certainly not a way that you would want to go about planning your future. Is I'm going to win the lottery. If I told somebody play the lottery as a retirement plan, they think I was ridiculous. But I think that's what a
Right.
lot of people do is I'm going to play a lottery strategy. I'm not going to do a whole lot. I won't really put much into it. And I'll just hope that I win the lottery and it will take care of, it'll kind of paper over the lack of planning and the lack of goal setting that I've
Yeah.
been doing.
Yeah. And if you think of like some of the scenarios that we've seen with our own client base and those that I would say are, let's say, financially successful. In other words, they are not worried about money. They have enough money. They're on good track. They're on pace for whatever the kind of financial goals that they have are. If you look backwards, it was from due diligence that they put in decades prior to. right? And
Absolutely.
this is, we're not talking about 70-year-olds. I mean, if we're working with someone that's 50 and they just want to make sure that they're doing the best they can to get their kind of money life to the next level, if you were to look back at them, you would say probably in their 30s ish, they made a decision that I've got to get my ducks in a row and make sure that I'm actually focusing on not only today, but the future so that I am more prepared at 50. And I would say that's a common theme for successful financial people in their mid 50s. It started probably 2 decades ago.
Yes. But that doesn't mean it's like this is hopeless. Like if you're trying to, if you're feeling like, all right, I got to get this figured out, like you got to accept this is not going to get turned around in 6 months or a year or two. Um, if you haven't really done much kind of planning and goal setting from a financial standpoint, it's not going to get turned around in one day. That doesn't mean it won't get turned around. I mean, it's one of those things where if you haven't been doing much planning or you haven't really thought too much about like what's going to happen in the future, and then you say I need to start doing it, well, you haven't done it at all. You didn't get to this place in 6 months and you're not going to get out of it in six, but it doesn't mean that you're not. Like there's definitely, let's start from the beginning and let's start setting some goals. Where do we, and start working through it. And we've seen, I mean, we've just seen so many instances of people saying, all right, I'm going to get focused and I'm going to start doing some stuff. And, you know, it's not a lack of income. I have money. That's not really the problem, but I do need to start getting a little bit more tight on what I'm doing and having people just get more focused on what they're doing and having some goal set and how quickly it just kind of, it seems like not much is happening for a little while. You're kind of setting the foundation and then you get started and it like just goes crazy. It's like, 2, 3 years later,
Yes.
it's like night and day where they were previously. So it's not like all hope is lost. But I do think if you say, I have to win the lottery and that's my strategy, it probably won't work. But if you say, I'm not going to win the lottery, I need to have some kind of methodical process, you can definitely make big jumps pretty quickly.
No doubt about it. We've seen people go from negative net worth, great income earners, the ability to save, by all intents and purposes on the outside, they look like they're doing fantastic, but negative net worth, doing some tweaking, refocusing, figuring out what truly are our values and why and where do we want to be, making some adjustments, redirecting maybe some of the funds, so to speak, and within 2 or 3 years, from negative to not just positive, but now they're on track to really start building wealth. And that's kind of the snowball effect. That little ball keeps rolling and rolling. Next thing you know, it amasses
Yep.
into something great. And you got to start somewhere. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you got any other thoughts or suggestions if someone was kind of struggling with this idea of setting the goals and, I don't know, maybe they hesitate just because they're fearful of the goal itself?
I mean, I think the only thing that would be somewhat actionable that you could do would be, yeah, I mean, it's always helpful to get a piece of paper out and just write some stuff down. I think if you just had a piece of paper and you wrote down on a piece of paper, kind of what's my high level objective? What am I really trying to accomplish? I'm going to say be a better person, but there's lots of things that you could figure out. I want to be great with money. I want to, um, master my money, and I want to make sure that my finances are supporting my life and not the other way around, or whatever you want to say. Something that's it's a lifelong objective, probably something to aspire to. That's kind of your higher level objective, your purpose, like you said. Then I think if you just go down and say what's kind of an intermediate goal that I could focus on that would help me work towards that. It's not going to get me there, but I'm making steps towards getting there. And I would say, what can I do in the next, let's call it 3 months? Here's an intermediate goal, something I can hit in 3 months. Let me be pretty specific about dates and let me get some kind of quantitative way that I would be hitting that. And then after I have that, let me back up and say, all right, what do I need to be doing on a daily or every other day max on a weekly basis that will get me to that point? And then when you get to that point in 3 months, you kind of just run the same process again. All right, next 3 months, what am I going to do? And I think that's a way that you could set a high level objective. You have some intermediate goals and then some daily actions in order to work towards that. Just write those on a piece of paper. I think that'd make a huge difference.
I think that's perfect. As they say, you can't run a marathon without taking the first step. So
Exactly. Right.
break it down to that. Great chat as always. Thanks for joining us. We'll look forward to the next discussion.
All right, cool. See you.
Cheers.